Number 2, understand work as a process. We'll drill a little deeper into that and the non-linearity of the work that we all do together. Number 3, skills in collecting, analyzing, and displaying data on the outcomes of care. This takes us back to one of the 3 phases, the central one: outcomes management, practice profiling, closure of the feedback loop, the Eisenberg's rules, giving doctors good information, non-punitive way, delivered by a local peer about their own performance. Number 4, work collaboratively with managers and patients. Do you believe that's a teachable skill? I think so. And finally, ability and willingness to learn from mistakes. Well, yikes! Above all else, do no harm. And in fact, of course, references abound. You know what percentage of house officers in the peer-reviewed literature, what percentage of house officers report a near-death error to the attending of record? What percentage of house officers report near-death error to the attending of record? You can take a wild guess. What do you think? 2%. Yeah, very low percentage. So for docs in a teaching environment, even more vigilance about the aspects of a just culture, openness, setting the expectations. We'll come back to all of that. So it's a pretty formidable list of skills. Wait, there's more. Wait, there's more. The systemsness of practice. I mean, we've sort of touched on that. What exactly do we mean about the systems nature of care? Well, let's tackle some of these in turn. We can greatly improve care by closing the often wide gaps between prevailing practice and the best-known evidence-based approaches to care. Well, I think we've pretty well established that as an important component of what we're here working on. Number 2, variation is too great to support the claim that everyone is correct. It's a sort of polite way of saying, what do we have? A normal distribution. Fortunately, most people are sort of somewhere in the middle with regard to their performance, but clearly we have a tail on that normal distribution that says these people need remedial education about what it is they're doing every day. Variation is too great to support the claim that everyone is right. So some people are a little less right than others, as we've been talking about. How do we translate research findings into practice? So what's the average length of time from peer-reviewed publication to implementation and practice? What's the answer?
10 years.
Yeah, somewhere between 10 and 15 years at the end. So more we work, greater technological imperatives, you get the idea. We've got a real challenge here. We don't have a decade plus to wait. And finally, reduction in medical error must be due in part to recognizing unsafe system design. So 85% of the time it's a failure in the process, 15% of the time it's that son of a gun whose handwriting you can't read anyway. But the money is on the 85%. But if you don't have the training or skills or knowledge to evaluate the process, the human nature reaction is take care of that 15%. Well, you'll be right only 15% of the time, clearly. So we'll come back to this as well. A little bit more about systemsness. So let's have a definition. A set of interdependent elements interacting to achieve a common aim. Okay, pretty straightforward, common sense definition, but here's the punchline. What you and I do every day, largely, what you and I do every day is considered non-linear in the language of quality improvement, meaning the following. In a manufacturing environment, you know, you're going to do A, you're going to do B, and most of the time, within the tolerance of the process, C will result. In our business, it's nonlinear. You're going to do A, you're going to do B, and D could result, or F could result. As a byproduct of this nonlinearity, when we make a change in the process, it then becomes critical for us to measure and evaluate the change that we make and close the feedback loop about that system. We'll come back to that. Main message at the moment, what we do, generally speaking, every day together is nonlinear. Meaning, you've got to be real careful. You cannot assume that A, then B, then C. It requires a test to evaluate what's going to occur after A and B. It defies a simple cause and effect notion, and as a result, prediction is difficult. Well, if prediction is difficult, that means we have some extra work to do to sort of figure this out together. Test changes on a small scale because of these interdependencies. We'll come back to that. And finally, traditional discipline-specific improvement ignores systemness. Traditional issues ignore systemness. If only the house officer were more vigilant, that error never would have occurred, right? So how many meetings have you been in a teaching environment where you have heard exactly that been uttered? Greater vigilance would reduce the error rate. Well, you know, if you have a deeper understanding of the nonlinear nature of what we do every day, you could be vigilant forever, hyper-vigilant, on a venti Starbucks, and it ain't going to make a difference. Ain't going to make a difference. We'll come back to all that. Okay, so now let's drill a little deeper into systemsness, and all of a sudden you'll start to see how even more complicated this becomes. Modern systems theory highlights cooperation. Uh-oh, there's that sort of soft leadership issue again. So raise your hand if you've had any formal training in crew resource management and cooperation on a team level. Okay, so 5 out of 100. Okay, and clearly that training did not come in residency or in medical school. Applications of research finding on cooperation led to crew resource management, so let's at least define this, and again, we won't have time to go into all the details. A great reference is Bob Helmreich's book, which we'll showed this morning on aviation safety as it relates to medicine. Crew resource management used to be called cockpit resource management, but that was felt to be too pilot-centric. So crew resource management. Military aviation is where this came from, then eventually applied to civilian aviation. The reality is, here's the question. Do you think that we could train to improve communication in a highly charged, dangerous environment? Do you think that we could actually teach communication skills that could reduce error in a highly charged, dangerous environment? The answer is, sure we can. And we've learned this from the military. What's deeply embedded in crew resource management is one theme called the ability and safety to go against the authority gradient. The ability to go against the authority gradient. Already your wheels should be turning about what that means in our culture. Safety and air cover to go against the authority gradient. Where in our business would crew resource management come in handy? Where do you think? Where would it come in handy? So raise your hand so I can recognize you. So please.
The
operating room. Okay, certainly one. Let's make a quick list. Where else? Emergency department, trauma bay, dialysis, ICU. I mean, a fair number of places. We could probably do a better job with training related to communication to improve safety, reduce error, have a better outcome. There are now private companies that actually have translated the language of CRM into medicine. We can talk about those in a little while if you'd like. So the ability to go against the authority gradient, we're actually going to touch on that, and I'll tell you a story to help illustrate the point. In military jargon, the lowest ranked individual has the ability to call a halt to the operation if he or she has access to information that's so critically important that might lead to a failure of the mission and put everybody else's lives at stake. Can you think of any examples in what you and I do every day where CRM might be appropriate? I can think of one experience I had where today, of course, house officers have the benefit of simulation centers. So a number of years ago at our medical school, I watched in the simulation center a simulated respiratory arrest. So there's a surgical team, as it turned out, practicing doing this simulation. And behind the scenes, the anesthesiologists are manipulating the robot, and it's getting pretty crazy. No drugs are working, nothing is happening. But out of the corner of my eye, I see the lowest ranked member of the team, the third-year medical student, jumping up and down, trying to get the attention of the senior resident running the code. And of course, what information did that lowest person on the totem pole have that would have been critical for the chief resident running the code to know about? Well, his job was to listen for lung sounds post-intubation. And of course, it had been rigged with his prior knowledge only, the third-year medical student, that the intubation was unsuccessful.